Hey everyone, this is going to be the very first video in a series. We're going to start with some really basic stuff and get into more complicated ideas and philosophy and stuff later. But these first ones are just going to be basic terms of stock work and the very beginnings of starting a dog and things like that. Some of these videos are going to be short and some of these are going to be pretty long. This first one's actually going to be a two-part series because we're going to talk about, first about the term, and then in the next part I'm going to talk about, well, how do you apply this? How do you show the dog what you want and teach the dog or fix a dog that you're having problems with? I'm going to try and do one of these a week. I don't know if that'll happen. This one kind of got delayed quite a bit, but we'll see how it goes. So anyway, this very first one is going to be on balance. And this is something, I think a lot of times beginners get confused on. They don't really quite understand what balance means. And I think one of the best analogies that I've seen for balance is that, let's say you have a beach ball in the river and you want to move it upstream. Balance is the point that, say, your finger would need to be to move that ball upstream and not lose control of it, not go this way and that way and every which way. So balance, and that's one thing that'll kind of point out to you, balance requires steady pressure. None of this, you get too frenetic and you lose it, the dog moving off of pressure, they lose balance. And I always thought that beach ball analogy was kind of a good explanation. The other thing about balance requires a destination. If you don't have a destination, you can't have balance. And a destination, it could be to you, it can also be driving away from you. And you can actually start a dog either which way. There's not necessarily a wrong way to do it. If you have sheep, a lot of times it's easier to start fetching, balancing to you with sheep. But if all you've got's, older cows that are big and hard to maneuver around, starting out driving, can work really well too. And we'll talk some in the next video about that and, kind of what you're looking for and how you go about it. Some dogs, they'll naturally pick their own balance spot. Some dogs, you see a lot of times a puppy, when you first put a puppy on stock, he may not necessarily balance to you, but he's trying to hold the stock somewhere, and they may wind up in the corner here, and he's out here holding them, and they try to get out, and he comes around and he blocks them, and he's balancing to that corner. He's balancing to where he feels that he has control of the stock, and can keep it from escaping and keep control of them. And what you want to do is, as you go on, you teach a pup that, hey, balance can be to me too, and you can keep control of the stock to me, and I'm going to help you do that. The dog has to understand you're part of the team. But this is like the most basic concept. You're going to take this concept of balance, and you're going to build on this whole thing into a finished point of training. If you skimp on this balance part, if the dog doesn't really understand balance and that he's holding stock to you or holding stock to somewhere particular, you're going to run into a lot of problems later. A dog that doesn't really understand balance, when you send him a big distance, he may come around here and the stock may go this way, and you'll have to tell him to do this and tell him to do that. Well, if you try and send a dog like that, out of sight, well, what's going to happen? He's not going to bring him to you because he doesn't really know what his job is. He doesn't, understand the most basic principle of balance. and holding that balance to take stock to you. You'll see sometimes, a dog that, he goes this way and he sees you and he says, oh, I'm gonna go over this way. And he comes over here and he sees you and he turns around. This dog's not balancing. A lot of people, beginners especially, they get this confused. They think because their dog is going back here around the stock that the dog is balancing. This isn't balance. This dog is just avoiding you, and that's all you're teaching him, is to avoid you. He's not really, understanding that he should hold a point. A dog that's balancing, they may move some, but their movements are going to be more like this. They're not going to be this, oh, you're over there, oh, you're over there. It's going to be adjusting a bit to, like you're moving your finger to hold the beach ball up the stream. It's not going to be these great big movements too much, unless you have a really big group of stock, in which case, the point of balance shifts as your group moves. And so the dog might pressure here, and then he might have to come over to this. Say we have more fluffy sheep here. He comes over to this one. They're moving. Because the stock is moving, balance changes. And that's the other thing. You also have, the stock wants to go different places and stuff. And so when we talk about fetching, sometimes balance is right over here across, but sometimes, say the stock wants to go this way, balance might be over here. And so the dog has to stop at this point or cover this point to still get the sheep to go to you. And so balance, the dog has to think on things. And like I said, if you're always controlling things, the dog is not thinking on where he needs to be. And we'll talk the next video, like I said, different techniques for, if my dog doesn't understand balance, how do I work on this? How do I get my dog to understand that his job is to take that control and bring stock to you, or taking stock away from you and driving. And depending on which way you start, you may do one first and then go the other way, or vice versa. And we'll talk about that on the next video.